Today we're looking at the latest NHL trade rumors around the Winnipeg Jets and Mark Scheifele, the Vancouver Canucks. Apparently there's only a very few select players on this roster that are safe. Plus we have updates from Chicago, and we know that they're open to trading just about everybody, but that even includes Kirby Dach. We'll discuss that scenario as well. We have a signing with the Rangers of Vitaly Kravtsov, more updates on the coaching carousel, and we'll discuss the playoffs and the upcoming Stanley Cup Final. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. First up, we saw the Eastern Conference Final come to an end last night with the Tampa Bay Lightning defeating the New York Rangers and ending that series 4-2 with a 2-1 victory. Steven Stamkos, of course, scored both goals for the Lightning. Stamkos does look like he was the man on a mission last night to get that go-ahead goal. It was a little bit odd at first because he shoots the puck, Shesterkin makes the glove save, and then it gets knocked into the net. You couldn't tell in the very first, like when it first happened, if it was in his glove and got pushed in, because of course that would likely not count, but it wasn't completely in there. It was in the glove, it came out, bounced off of Stamkos and went in the net, so they did review it, and it was a good goal. So the Lightning continue for their three-peat venture here. Of course, this will be the first time we've seen a team in the Cap era go for 3 consecutive Stanley Cup Final appearances. Of course, it could be the first time we see 3 consecutive Stanley Cup championship victories as well. Hasn't been done since the early 80s in the New York Islanders. Of course, we've seen the Penguins do a back-to-back, but that's as close as it came. The year after that, for their third year, they didn't make it to the final and have a chance to win for that third consecutive year. So we have now the Stanley Cup Final of the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Colorado Avalanche. That should be a very interesting series. These two teams are both built very deeply, but are very different. They do have some differences for sure. You have to think the Lightning definitely have an edge in goal with Vasilevsky, the way he's played. They've had an edge in goal pretty well every series except for the Rangers series, where you could say he was pretty even. Igor Shesterkin, arguably the slightly better goaltender this year. In that series, though, I think obviously with Vasilevsky getting the victory, you could say he outperformed, but not by much. Igor was a big reason why the series went 6 games and the Rangers really had a chance to win. But obviously that's the one main area that the Lightning are going to have an edge in. Now, I know Stamkos talked about the fact that in this series, they felt that the rest that they got between second and third round was very beneficial. He said they started rusty, so it wasn't good short term, but it benefited them long term. Whereas the New York Rangers, they went 7-6, and that just, he feels like they maybe ran out of gas, which to a degree could be the case, or at least part of the issue and the demise of the Rangers here in the last 4 straight losses for that club. But if that's the case, then you have to think that it might be the opposite in the final, where the Avalanche are going to be more rested here and might possibly have the same effect here, where the Lightning are really going to have 3 days off, where Colorado's had an extended time. So we'll see if that plays a role or not. It should be a very exciting final here. You're going to have guys like McKinnon, McCarr, Landeskog, Rantanen against Stamkos and the gang in the Lightning organization to do battle. See if they can end the Lightning streak here. When it comes to Braden Point, it's reported that it's not a guarantee that he would have played Game 7, but John Cooper did say it's extremely probable that he appears in the Stanley Cup Final. Not a guarantee for Game 1. I think in a Game 7 situation, they might have put him in just because of the circumstances of the game. And they probably would rather have Braden Point at 70-80% than maybe another player that they could take out, like a Riley Nash or something. But obviously, if have a few extra days off, we'll reevaluate, see where things go. And, he may not play Game 1, but it's possible. But I would say by Game 2 or 3, it sounds pretty likely that he'll be in the lineup. Now, we also got some news on the second intermission from Elliotte Friedman. It wasn't really an official 32 Thoughts segment because he didn't have his buddy Jeff Merrick with him, but they did update a few things. Apparently, a couple of players with the Edmonton Oilers are reportedly contemplating retirement. That's Mike Smith and Duncan Keith. Of course, they're both older players. Keith into his late 30s. Smith past the age of 40 now. Both have 1 year left on their contracts. We heard Mike Smith talk about this a little bit more openly at the end of season wrap-up after they were eliminated from the playoffs by the Avalanche. He did make comments suggesting that there was a chance that he may not be back next year. And even though Duncan Keith didn't say so publicly, according to Friedman, there is some that think that he might be contemplating that as well. No guarantees that either actually do it. At that point, you got to remember they're emotional from the loss. They're banged up from a hard-fought playoff series, and playoff rounds before that, in an 82 game regular season. That's, their bodies takes a lot to really take a toll on them. And, when it's fresh and you're freshly eliminated from the playoffs, I'm sure they're sitting there thinking, do I want to go through all this again? It's, so much effort, right? So I think they need to have some time to decompress, talk to their families, recover a little bit, clear their head and make some decisions. But the Oilers apparently have asked both players to give them a firm decision by July 1st. Of course, that's about a week's a jump start here on the draft, and then just shy of 2 weeks from free agency. So it gives them time to react accordingly if they're not going to be coming back. And if they are going to be retiring, then obviously that'll impact their cap situation and what's available, and do they need to be replaced, etc., that kind of stuff. So we'll see where it goes. Elliotte Friedman also talked about the Sharks general manager search. Apparently they are getting closer to making a decision. They're down to about 3 to 5 candidates. It does appear that most of those candidates, who we've kind of thrown some names out before, like Kevin Weeks, Ray Whitney, a few others as well, mostly are going to be first-time GM. So it's most likely scenario that whoever they hire is going to be new to the role, be their first time as an NHL general manager, and there's a pretty good chance it's going to be somebody who's a former player, not guaranteed, but possible, or at least has some connection to the organization from the past. It looks as though that was something that was important to them as well. So we will see where things go, but it shouldn't be too long before we get an update on that. He also reported on the Ottawa Senators, talking about the fact that they're expected to make some additions to their hockey operations department. The front office is a little thin, has been for a long time under the Melnyk era here. They quite often run one of the thinnest staffs across the NHL. So nice to hear that they're looking to make some additions. They certainly could use it, but it's really not going to be much of an addition per se, because they did let go of Pierre Maguire not long into the offseason. So I'm not sure if they'll replace him, because he didn't really define any specific roles they were looking for. When you're talking hockey ops, it could be a variety of things. It could be amateur scouting, pro scouting. It could be, different things, right? So it didn't really specify. Of course, Maguire's role was involved around player personnel and pro scouting, so we'll see what they decide to do. We've also seen comments publicly from President of Hockey Ops Anthony LeBlanc recently, saying that one of their big focuses right now with the Senators is really reconnecting with the fans and alumni, and that's kind of one of their big focuses for the upcoming season. He also did say that they've had some really good news when it comes to season ticket numbers going up, and obviously things are improving. We know Eugene Melnyk had a very strained relationship with the fan base, and since he's now passed, even though his daughter still owned the team, it appears as though they have a different way of thinking. I know Anthony LeBlanc mentioned that a lot of this is their strategy, and they're very forward-thinking young ladies. So we'll see what they decide to do. He's already had conversations apparently with Chris Neal, who does still do some work with the organization, and Chris Phillips, and former captain Daniel Alfredson. Alfredson himself has also made public comments recently saying that he would be interested in returning to the organization in some capacity. He's just kind of waiting for them to kind of reach out and see if they want him, I guess, and discuss what the role could be or whatever. So no guarantees that it happens, of course, but it sounds like they have reached out to him. Now, a lot of those players that they've been talking to doesn't mean they're looking to talk about roles or work within the organization. This is going to be their 30th anniversary season coming up here for 22-23, and that's why, of course, it's important because of the relationship status with the fan base and the alumni, that they need to reconnect and really improve those relations, but they also are reaching out to a lot of people in that regard to make plans to celebrate the 30th anniversary too. So it could lead to a number of different things, and hopefully they can really get things back going there. We should have news on an Ottawa Senators a potential downtown arena coming up soon. The LeBreton Flats Commission is going to be making an announcement. I think it's going to be around, I believe it was June 24th. It's in the next couple of weeks here. It's not too far away that we should have an update. So that hopefully, for Sens fans, fingers crossed, we'll get some good news about at least things progressing in the right direction for potential new downtown arena. Now, on the coaching carousel front, we got some more updates from Friedman too on Saturday night. Talks about Barry Trotz being linked to the Jets, Flyers, Vegas, and Detroit are the 4 teams he's been able to link Trotz to. Bruce Cassidy has been linked to Vegas, Dallas, Detroit, Philly. He thinks maybe Winnipeg reached out to him after he was let go, but couldn't confirm. Jim Montgomery, the former Dallas Stars head coach and currently working with St. Louis, who's on an expiring assistant coach contract, apparently has also been linked to Vegas, Winnipeg and Boston too. So we'll see where things go. There is some people speculating that somebody like Barry Trotz, Bruce Cassidy, might be making some decisions soon. That once the domino falls, we'll see the rest kind of fall in line, but a lot of teams and other candidates are kind of waiting for those guys to make decisions since they're right at the top of most teams' list. We also know that Gary Bettman's not real fond of a lot of big news coming out around the league during the Stanley Cup final. Since the final gets underway on Wednesday, I would imagine that teams are probably hoping to get some things announced by Tuesday, or it may hold off for a little bit longer from there, or if it'd be on an off day in between games or something like that. And obviously, you don't want to steal the spotlight from the Stanley Cup final if you can help it, but at the same time, your team has to do what it's got to do. Coaching news out of Florida as well. Apparently, they've let go a couple of assistant coaches. Ulf Samuelsson and Derek McKenzie will not return. This comes from Kevin Weeks, who did one of his breaking news videos earlier today on Twitter, talking about that as well. He said he could not confirm on goalie coach Rob Tallis, no word, so it doesn't know if he's returning or not. And there's still no word on interim head coach Andrew Brunette. But there are other reports that I've read that indicated that this was something that we could see happen. And you would think that if Brunette wasn't going to be back, that they probably would have announced this all at the same time. You wouldn't think they'd be doing this in steps, but you just never know. I mean, look at Boston, right? You thought Cassidy was coming back, and they changed one assistant coach, and then boom, Cassidy's out. I don't suspect the same thing in that regard, but you just never know. But I think they're kind of taking their time here. But at this point, indications are pointing to Brunette returning with a whole new staff. So we'll see where that goes. Now, we did get a signing earlier today, an interesting piece of news out of the New York Rangers organization. They have signed, I guess we can call him a disgruntled prospect winger, Vitaly Kravtsov, to a one-year contract, which is also a one-way deal at $875,000. Of course, we know at the beginning of this year that just ended for the Rangers. Kravtsov did not make the team out of camp, was demoted and was not happy, and ended up going back to Russia. I know at one point in his contract he did have a European out clause that if he wasn't on the NHL roster that he could be reassigned to Europe. Now, this is a one-way deal, so this is a way for his agent, Dan Milstein, to do one of two things here. Either ensure his client makes the Rangers roster out of camp next year, or it gives them more leverage to trade him. Because it was reported earlier this year there was a good chance Kravtsov would probably be dealt. But then there was reports that the Rangers were in no hurry to do that. They didn't want to give him away at low value. Let him go over and play in Russia, see what he could do to improve his value, which is obviously not a bad idea. There were no big rush there. And then, of course, that he's got a contract, that helps too. I mean, for a team that's going to acquire him, though, they'd have to be comfortable to let him stay on the NHL roster, or they'd have to put him through waivers. And if they put him through waivers, well, then obviously he's likely going to get snatched up by another team that's willing to give him a chance. So this is kind of gets leverage back in the corner of Kravtsov. Doesn't mean he's going to be a Ranger, though, because it does give him more trade value. So either way, they have some big decisions to make. They have a lot of players that they acquired, like Andrew Kopp, Frankie Vetrano, that need new deals. Ryan Strome's a UFA. And there was a lot of people talking about Capo Caco today because he was a scratch in the Game 6 last night. Gerard Gallant scratched him in favor of Dryden Hunt, which I know I meant to mention earlier in the video and the recap of the playoff game, which I don't understand that move at all, to be honest. But, it's creating some people to say, is Kako going to be upset with that and maybe want to be moved? I don't really think that he's got a lot of leverage in that regard. I don't think the Rangers are ready to give up on the former number 2 overall pick. It'd have to be something awfully tempting coming back before they go down that road. But Kravtsov is in a different scenario, so we'll see where that goes. Now, in the trade talk today, I want to talk about Mark Scheifele. We haven't talked about him in a while, and Frank Seravalli made some very interesting comments on his DFO Rundown podcast here in the last couple of days that I thought I want to bring up here, because we've talked about Scheifele, and we've talked about the Winnipeg Jets maybe having a little bit of a locker room problem. We heard a lot of end-of-season comments from certain players, predominantly Paul Stastny, making reference that there could be some players in there that were more concerned with their own individual performances, careers, being a little selfish, that kind of stuff. And just he didn't come out and say Scheifele, but just the way he was talking, the questions, the way they were worded, sure made it sound that way. And this basically confirms it, what Frank Seravalli was able to confirm through his sources. He says that Mark Scheifele has essentially become known as a complainer. So he likes to whine and complain, and the Jets have been basically kind of catering to him to kind of make him happy and try to keep him engaged in wanting to be a Winnipeg Jet, because he says they're obviously heavily invested here with a Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois combo down the middle of the ice. They're still both really productive players. He said that the Jets don't really want to trade them because that's what they were trying to build here around those two guys being their two centers. And, if he asks for a trade, they might not have a choice, but it hasn't reached that level here just yet. But ultimately, it kind of confirms what some of the other players like Stastny were talking about. And he says Scheifele just appears to be just very frustrated and just not a happy person. And it's not really quite clear what's causing it. He's like, is it the lack of team success? Is it the market? Does he not want to be in Winnipeg anymore? Obviously, he hasn't asked for a trade yet, so it doesn't appear to be that. And it's hard to pinpoint why Scheifele has become a whiner and complainer all the time. So we'll see. He said the only thing that's really going to likely cause a trade is if Scheifele says, I want out. And at this point, we have not been able to confirm that he said that. Indications point that he has not. So it doesn't look like there's going to be a trade. But when I talked before about the fact that the Jets might benefit from a move just from the locker room's perspective, I can just imagine what kind of impact that might be having on his teammates and what it might be like to be around. And I really wondered if guys like Scheifele and Wheeler might have really had a major negative impact on Patrick Laine and why he was kind of sour to one out of there too. That's something that Winnipeg needs to deal with. If that's causing a lot of other players to not want to be there and really having a negative impact on the locker room, it doesn't matter what he wants. You might have to weigh out the pros and cons of your roster here. You might want to rethink things, but it doesn't look like he's getting traded right now. But it does look like the rumors from before of his attitude being really, really kind of selfish appears to be true, according to Sarah Bailey. Now, Elliotte Friedman has made some comments, additional talk here on the Blackhawks. We've talked about them being open to trading just about anybody. If they're not on a no-move clause, because then that player would have full control, they're willing to listen, and we can be able to confirm after that Alex DeBrincat is definitely included in that. Frank Saravelli seems convinced that DeBrincat's going to be traded either in the offseason or by the deadline. And another player that appears to be part of that too is Kirby Dach. Surprisingly, Elliotte Friedman has confirmed, made comments that they are listening. Not a guarantee that they move him. I would imagine it's fair to say that they're not as much in a hurry to move Dach as they would a lot of other players on the team. But at the same time, they are willing to listen, and if the right offer comes along, they're willing to entertain it. We've seen Dach take a major step back this year, and I think they're already starting to have maybe some concerns, and they don't really want to have this drag on too much longer. If he can bounce back, great. But if he can't, then it's just going to continue to diminish his value. They might be looking to maybe sell while the value is still relatively high. So we'll see. Dach's young, but there's lots of teams that would love to have a big, young center like him. He's not the kind of player that you get your opportunity with a lot. And he was drafted with a lot of promise and potential, and he has shown flashes of it, just a matter of keeping it consistent. So we'll see where that goes. And some updates on Vancouver. We've heard comments from Nick Kypreos, who was on the Bob McCown podcast, talking with Bob and John Shannon, talking about the fact that Jim Rutherford's really unhappy with the Canucks locker room, and they only feel there's really 4 safe players on this team. We're talking Hughes, Pettersson, Demko, and Horvat. He said other than that, you could expect some potential major changes coming to the Canucks roster this offseason. So, there's been a lot of talk about Miller, but it sounds like we can lump Brock Boeser into that conversation as well. He's not mentioned in this group of 4 core safe players, but I do think of everybody else that Boeser is probably less likely than most of the other guys. But I think a lot of that's going to depend on the contract negotiations. He's owed a pretty big qualifying offer, and if they can agree to him by giving him a little extra term in exchange for some lower AAV, then they probably won't move him. But if negotiations go poorly and he's demanding too much money, then he could be shopped too. But you're looking at Tyler Myers, JT Miller, Brock Boeser, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Some of these guys will be difficult to trade. So then we're not expecting everybody to go, but there will be at least conversations around them. And you're looking at Tanner Pearson's another name that apparently Rutherford would like to move. Connor Garland, Jason Dickinson. Like, there's a lot of Canuck players that could find themselves traded this offseason. Rutherford's not happy with the construction of the roster. We've heard him publicly say a lot about what he thinks, and this shouldn't really come as a big surprise. But all the players that are due potential extensions, I think Horvat's the most likely to get one, and Besser is probably right there as well, depending on where things go negotiation-wise. I do think that it's likely that Besser stays, but if it goes poorly and he's commanding too much money and won't budge up the $7 million qualifying offer, that might not bode well for him staying in Vancouver. So let me know your thoughts on something discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.